Hello there. Welcome to Conflict News 2042 complete situation report for you from Gaza, where around 24 hours ago, at last, Israel launched ground operation, large scale, though limited, ground attack on Gaza. Details for you. How is this operation going? Is Israeli military getting some results? Has it managed to gain a foothold in Gaza? Details for you in this video. Secondly, northern border, Israel, Lebanon border, things heating up there. Ongoing clashes since the 7th of October. There were the latest there. A senior Hamas leader killed in a drone strike by Israeli Air Force yesterday. Fourthly, UN Assembly voted yesterday calling for ceasefire. Some European countries opposed. They abstained from voting. Which European countries did not support the resolution? Uh, Secondly, Russia. A Hamas delegation was in Russia yesterday. Lastly, US. He was conducting strikes on Iran-backed elements and Iranian Revolutionary Guards Corps commanders in Syria. More sanctions from US on Iranian and Hamas elements. And lastly, a protest by Jews against the war. It happened in New York, US. Let's start with an update on the ground operation launched by Israeli military in Gaza. We have been hearing talk of this ground operation for several days. At last, around 24 hours ago, Israeli military entered Gaza. Before that, we saw small-scale incursions into Gaza. Those were attacks to test the ground. The attacks happened in the last 72 hours. Then first major ground attack happened around 24 hours ago when Israeli tanks, Israeli APCs infiltrated, entered Gaza, northern Gaza, and fighting erupted on Gaza territory. At least on three fronts, there were clashes. Combat, urban combat, now we can say, between Israeli military and Palestinian fighters. Palestinian fighters include members of Hamas, PIJ, and several other groups too. It's difficult to say what is the outcome of this ground operation because it just started. It will go on for several days, if not several months. Hamas claims that it has repelled this first ground attack by Israelis on Gaza territory. It says that Israeli military has suffered losses on three fronts. That Hamas and other fighters fired anti-tank guided missiles and rockets. Drones were used as well, so no considerable achievement by Israeli military in this operation. Too early to say. We're waiting, but the operation is set to go on. Meanwhile, Gaza is under total communication blackout. Before the start of ground invasion, Israel cut off all communications in Gaza. So Gaza is cut off now with rest of the world. No one knows what is happening there. So we cannot get any videos, pictures live from Gaza now because internet cut off there. It happened before the start of ground invasion. The strategy adopted by the military is that infantry backed by armored has entered Gaza. Airstrikes are continuing. Airstrikes ongoing since the 7th of October. So despite start of military operation, ground operation in Gaza, airstrikes are continuing. So too early to say, but I think we'll have to wait. Meanwhile, Israel says it is going to expand the area of ground operation. Question is, what is Israel's objective? Does it want to hold territory? Does it want to reach Hamas facilities, which are deep down under the ground? Meanwhile, Israeli Air Force is bombarding Gaza, and bunker busters, which are bombs able to penetrate ground, are being fired. And these bombs can penetrate the ground around 100 feet. These bombs are being fired by Israeli planes, confirmed by Israeli military. Situation in Gaza, dire. Humanitarian consequences of this operation are going to be severe. Israel says it is conducting an operation to put an end to Hamas's military capabilities. People say it is going to take some time for Israel to control or to strike any decisive blow to Palestinian groups in Gaza. Hamas, clear, it says that it has capability to defend the territory. Let's see what happens. So far, ground operation ongoing, fighting on three fronts reported. Secondly, Israel-Lebanon border still clashes there. Missiles, rockets being fired yesterday. Guided missiles were fired from Lebanon. So situation is the same there. Since the start of this war, on the 7th of October, we have seen fighting there. That Hezbollah fighters are firing missiles, rockets on Israeli military targets on the border. Israel responding by firing artillery shells, drone strikes being conducted too. So no change there. That front is active, but no ground incursions into Israel from Lebanon so far. While Israel military operation in Gaza has begun, no ground attacks on Israel from Lebanon, which were being feared that in case of Israel's ground operation in Gaza, Hezbollah could join in completely. So far, it has not happened, reportedly. Meanwhile, a top Hamas commander has been killed, who is head of air defense units of the organization. In a drone strike, Israeli Air Force killed the Hamas commander yesterday. Video has been shared too by Israeli military. His name is Asim Abu Rakaba, head of air defense unit, killed in a drone strike yesterday. Fourthly, UN General Assembly at last adopted a resolution calling for ceasefire in the Middle East between Israeli military and Palestinian fighters. Voting was held yesterday. 120 countries supported. The resolution was proposed by Jordan, which is border with Israel. 14 opposed the resolution, including US, Israel, Ukraine too, and some other countries. 14 countries opposed. 45 were either absent or they abstained from voting. And from this, out of 45, at least 10 are EU member countries. They backed the resolution. They called for ceasefire. And they called for unconditional, unhindered delivery of aid to the people of Gaza. Which 10 countries, EU countries, supported the resolution? Germany, Belgium, Ireland, Malta, Portugal, Spain, Slovenia, Luxembourg, Norway, and Switzerland. So EU is not united. For the first time, we're starting to see now that EU could be split if this war goes on, because some EU countries are openly calling for a ceasefire. By the way, when Macron visited Israel 3 to 4 days ago, he opposed ground invasion of Gaza. He said it would be risky, it would lead to more escalation. But Israel did not listen. Ground invasion started. Now, EU countries calling for ceasefire. Some EU countries, only 10 are calling for ceasefire. Meanwhile, Russia hosted a Hamas delegation yesterday. Israel indignant, asking Russia to expel Hamas delegation. Hamas delegation was led by Musa Abu Marzouk. Discussions were held between the delegation and Russian Foreign Ministry. Did the delegation meet with Putin, the president? It's not clear. Why is that Russia invited a Hamas delegation? It could be that Russian nationals are also captives, hostages being held by Russian groups in Gaza. I think 5 or 6 hostages are Russians. Russia wants its nationals to be released. Though main negotiations for the release of hostages are ongoing in Qatar, and I think negotiations failed. That is why ground invasion of Gaza was launched. The main negotiation hub is Qatar. Russia wants to negotiate directly with Hamas. That is why Hamas delegation was invited to Russia, but Israel not happy with this visit by Hamas delegation to Russia. Lastly, US viewers, US gradually being involved in this war. We've seen several attacks on US military bases in the Middle East since the start of Israel-Palestine conflict on the 7th of October. Several military sites targeted in the last 72 hours. Ain al-Assad base, Matar Abu Hajar, Kharab al-Jair in Syria, Al-Tanaf, Syria, Umar oil field in Syria. All these bases and others were hit in the last 72 hours by Iran-backed or other armed factions based in Syria and Iraq. And the US responded yesterday by conducting strikes. US conducted strikes yesterday in Syria in 2 locations, in Al-Humada to the east of Deir ez-Zor and in Al-Mazari. Strikes were conducted by US fighter jets and bombers against Iran, Revolutionary Guards Corps commanders, and Iran-backed proxies in Syria. It happened, the attacks were carried out, these attacks were carried out after dozens of attacks on US bases in Syria and Iraq in the last few days. What was the loss suffered by on the ground facilities? It's not clear. Meanwhile, US has imposed sanctions on Hamas officials and some IRGC Iranian officials allegedly supporting Hamas fighters. And yesterday we heard that Ali Murshid Shirazi and Mustafa Muhammad Khan of Iranian Revolutionary Guards Corps were put under sanctions by US. And other IRGC commander Ali Ahmad Fazullahi was also sanctioned. And a Hamas commander, Khalid Kadomi, was also sanctioned yesterday by US Treasury Department. US is continuing the pressure on Hamas, on Iran. US gradually becoming involved in this conflict, though US military is not part of ground invasion of Gaza. US is not conducting strikes, drone strikes on Gaza. US is not conducting drone strikes, strikes on Hezbollah. US is only involved so far to the extent of providing military support to Israel, diplomatic support to Israel, and conducting strikes on Iran-backed elements in Syria, which happened yesterday. Meanwhile, a protest a few hours ago in the US, in New York, by American Jews who called for ceasefire, opposing the war. So you see that these protests by Jews calling for ceasefire and Muslims calling for ceasefire in support of those killed by Hamas are just breath of fresh air. There are Jews who are opposing this war. There are Muslims who oppose Hamas's attacks on civilians. Thousands attended this protest, which was held at main train station of New York. And police took action. Around 200 were arrested after the main train station was blocked by protesters chanting slogans for putting an end to the war in the Middle East. Watch a clip from this protest. Thank you for watching.